And he said something like, it's not just going through the motions. It's not just like showing up and doing it. It's like you got to believe it. You got to internalize it. You have to know you're headed somewhere. You have to actually believe that you can get there. It's not just like staying here, doing everything, but not actually in your heart and your soul believing you'll ever get there, or believing something's wrong with you, or believing you had this thing happen. And so he like slapped me upside the head one day, metaphorically, and like what I would say is it woke me up. And I was like, wow. And it was almost an outsourced, like a surrogate confidence that I could do it. And at that point, like I went through the roof.
I'm Garrett Salpeter, and I believe that the most powerful and transformative way to help people recover from pain and injury, heal from trauma, and reach their highest levels of fitness and performance is to focus on the nervous system. In this podcast, we'll share knowledge from the frontiers of neuroscience and inspirational stories of how applying that knowledge has empowered people from all walks of life to heal, adapt, and grow. Welcome to this episode of the Undercurrent Podcast. I'm joined today by Joe Distefano, who is the founder of Runga, a wonderful, immersive health optimization, biohacking, wellness experience company, live events, and online community. Yeah. They're doing some really cool things there that I'm excited to talk with you about. But also, even before we get into that, he has a very interesting experience with his own brain injury and the process he went through to recover from that. And that's actually one of the ways that we met. We got connected by a couple of different mutual friends, but one was Dr. John Marchese, a functional neurologist up in the Boston area where you're from also.
Yeah.
And he actually had worked, so before we met, Joe had used the newbie, and we'll get into all that. But first of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Garrett. Happy to be here, man. I'm glad the stars finally aligned for us here.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to dive into this. So before we get into your business, and you got some really cool experiences and some things that I'm excited to share with our audience, can we dive into your brain injury experience? Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit of what happened and talk us through that recovery journey?
Yeah, absolutely, Garrett. And, it's an interesting thing. And I'll start by saying, like, there's this, just about everything that I've done especially over the last, like, 11 or 12 years, it's all just interpreting, or it's all just kind of repackaging learnings from my own recovery, right? So how did I find breath? How did I find cold immersion? How did I find nutritious food? How did I redefine food? How did I redefine exercise? It's all because of people like John Marchese and the journey that I went on, and kind of learning what worked and what didn't, and kind of having this sensitivity or having this thing in my life that became this like magical, like not lie detector test, but kind of like lie detector test. Like, is this food healthy? Well, if it makes me feel worse or cognitively decline, like it's not healthy. If I have brain fog after I eat this thing, then I'm pretty sure it's not going to be healthy for me. And so that's actually what helped me cut through a lot of the noise, because I'm conventionally trained. I have my undergrad degree is in exercise physiology, and a lot of that was nutrition and sports nutrition and fueling. And on my path from brain injury, I had to do almost the opposite of everything I had known. And so ultimately it led me to a slightly different destination. And over the last like 10 years, it's like that destination has become a lot more popular. So it's been kind of an interesting ride. So I guess what I'm saying is there's this, one time somebody asked me, like, if there was one thing in your life you could change, what would it be? And like I thought and finally came up with something, but it wasn't my brain injury. It wasn't fracturing my skull. It wasn't that. That didn't even like come into my mind. And so when I sat with that later, I was like, wow, that's bizarre. Because sometimes we get into this like, this is good or this is bad. And I think that's a destructive path. And if you're on the path to any form of recovery, identifying something as bad or you as being in an unfortunate place in an unfortunate time and having this unfortunate occurrence. I'm not saying even that might not be true, but it's destructive in your path and road to recovery. So a great example when I was seeing Dr. John Marchese, and the truth of the story is interesting. We just had the 20-year anniversary of it was April 23rd, right? So now my head injury was 20 years ago.
Wow.
Right? And there's so much here, and this is a 4-hour podcast if I dove into some of the elements of this. But essentially, when you look at this, and now amazing, like there's now, like I've got a concussion kit in my car that's basically got like ketones and aminos and fish oil. So like if today when I got rear-ended on the way here, if I had hit my head, I would have guzzled my concussion kit just in case, right? So I think on the road back, your mind state is everything. But what I learned is that it's this really delicate thing, because when I had this head injury, I was so focused on basically proving that I was okay, right? And by the way, I was in the wrong place at the right time. Wrong time, you could say, right? So I was playing on a community basketball hoop. It was not a temporary basketball hoop. It was not one of the ones you fill with sand and move around your driveway. This is a concrete, allegedly permanent structure that somehow fractured at the ground and went like this, like a tumbling tree. And I was fight, flight, freeze. So that's the thing, is the people that were around, there was a couple of people, my brother included, I didn't try to move. I didn't try to get out of the way, because you don't. You're like everyone's seeing like deer in headlights, or, anyone that's ever watched Discovery Channel or whatever, it's like the gazelle just like goes limp when it knows it's done.
Yeah.
So as it relates to the road to recovery, so what happened to me, this thing fell on top of me, fractured my skull, cerebral spinal fluid leaking out of my head, obviously unconscious. Wake up whenever it was in the ambulance on the way to the hospital, go into surgery, get sent to a different hospital because this surgical team wasn't prepared enough or didn't know what they were getting themselves into. So there was this whole like experience. But here's the thing, like it was so traumatic for my family. So here's the thing, when it's like there's like the thing and then there's all the other attached things. And so for me, it was so hard on my family, my brother. I'm sure my brother's still dealing with this, right? How do you witness that? How do you see that? So for me, my story is basically as sort of a, whatever I am, my job internally and not consciously because I was young, but my job was to like prove to everyone that I was okay. So when I came out of surgery, I just started like reciting my address and my phone number and anything that I could like recall, because I was trying to send my family a signal that like cognitively I was okay, right? Interestingly, by the time Dr. Marchese found me, I was 10 years removed and like the wheels were falling off, right? So like I couldn't walk in a straight line,
And what was that trajectory like over 10 years? Did you get better and then worse? Or was it just walk us through that.
Basically every year there was like a slight degradation in some type of my performance. So I started having massive like physical issues like jaw pain, neck pain, shoulder pain, hip pain, and just kind of like unexplained.
So,
right?
So you were coming out of it. I mean, were you cognitively and physically after getting out of the hospital and everything, like 80%, 90%?
Well, here's the thing. Yeah.
And then it declined from there, or what? Okay.
Here's the funny thing, right? So when you're in that scenario and you're coming out of a surgery and the doc tells your parents and you're going to make a full recovery, you and them don't have the same definition of what a full recovery is. Right? If I'm a young athlete that's used to throwing fastballs and playing baseball and skateboarding and doing all these things, not that I didn't continue to do some of that, but there's a certain definition of health that isn't aligned oftentimes. So that doctor means you're alive and you're not debilitated, you're not a vegetable, you're not in a wheelchair. My parents say in a month he's going to be the same kid I knew 3 months ago, right? So that in itself creates a little bit of a situation where when things start to fall apart, so my like depressive symptoms, my attention deficit problems, my all of these cognitive signs in the years that followed were not interpreted as related to the thing. Eye contact. I had to learn eye contact. So there's like this, all these pieces of the puzzle were not attributed to this, because I made a full recovery from that. Like I'm fine. Yeah, don't mind that my face is like suddenly asymmetrical. Don't mind that my head's tilted a little bit. Don't mind that I can't stay focused or I can't read anymore. Like, don't look at all that stuff, but like, so that was actually the story in terms of like, in retrospect only, could you say, in my case, look at all this, look at this pathology. And so that's where somebody like Dr. John or Dr. Prococo or any of these people that could actually, or were trained or were aware enough or were kind of with it enough, could say, wow, this is all related to your head injury. Or this is all related to your head injury and let's see what we can do about it. Because the other thing, kiss of death for me, was I saw a neurologist or whoever, doc, and he made all the connections and looked at my chart and my history and whatever. And he was like, he says, Muhammad Ali got hit in the head too many times. Michael J. Fox has bad luck. But that's the road you're on. So he's like, you'll be Michael J. Fox by 30, and I hate to break it to you. But like, because I was diagnosed with a dystonia physically. So like just this like bizarro muscle tension and this like waking up and my arm is just like in a flexed position. Like, what the hell is going on? So anyways, it was a couple of really good docs that helped me kind of paint the picture. But also the big thing with Prococo in particular was he was the first guy. He's like Tony Robbins. Dr. Prococo is similar to Marchese. He's 40 minutes outside the city.
And so he's a functional neurology guy too, right? So just for our listeners, so you saw this traditional MD neurologist who at least was able to put the pieces together, connect the dots, and let you know like, hey, these symptoms are related to the brain injury you had a decade ago, which is good information, but it gave you a problem with no solution, basically, other than it's just going to be like this. And
that's the thing, right? So like when you go to a conventional doc, it's like you get an antidepressant, you get an anti-anxiety, you get Ritalin, you get some kind of stimulatory, attention. So you end up having to carry your Easter basket of medications around. And that was the journey that I was on, and I refused from a young age to do any of that stuff. So.
And then, well, I'm glad you found certainly Dr. Marchese. We know, I don't know Dr. Prococo, but in this world of functional neurology, just for our listeners' benefit, my first mentor who really set me on this path that led me to NeuFit was a functional neurologist, and they have this really, really interesting, sophisticated discipline based in a deep understanding of neuroanatomy, and it basically, to summarize, it basically is this process of identifying, okay, you have a deficit in this activity, say making eye contact or eye teaming or moving your eyes to the left or swallowing or something cognitive or hearing. Okay, so we know that, or you tend to lean to one side. Like, okay, we know that action is ultimately controlled or at least influenced by this part of the brain. So let's do activities to increase or decrease function and activation in this part of the brain. So it's this very precise and wonderful and elegant and beautiful approach to influencing specific parts of the brain. So you then fortunately, thank goodness, met these doctors who are doing functional neurology. And then the next chapter, I just want to set the stage for everybody. But
like I said, it's hard for me not to talk all day, but right on.
So then what was your experience like once you got into this world of functional neurology? You said you were having trouble with eye contact, veering off to one side when you're walking. Right. So, were there other things going on? And then what was your experience and what changed?
So, well, what I identified is there's a certain... did a lot of eye movement exercises. I did, I still got the peppermint inhalers. So like you said, there's all sorts of ways to activate certain areas. I guess where I'm kind of going with this is, I think when you're dealing with a head trauma, there's just so much baked around it. So I think from a functional neurology perspective, whatever treatment that I went through, and Dr. John Marchese, I think I went to him 3 days a week for like 2 years, right? And the funny thing is, I was hitting Marchese like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Prococo Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. So it was just this like all hands on deck thing. But now in my work today, and getting people in ice baths or teaching them how to swing a kettlebell, even though they're afraid to hurt their back, I think the big learning was I didn't get the software upload. So when you look at like some of the hypotheses around like hyperbaric oxygen for TBI or concussion, there's that area of the brain that received the impact or is performing suboptimally for any reason. What you're doing, and I'm obviously a novice and I don't understand exactly what you're doing in all areas, but like maybe I don't know if I can swear, but like maybe like a hopefully not insulting definition of what you do is like, if there's an electrical area of the body that's not up to charge, you're going to send current there to wake it back up. And so hopefully the body picks back up on the signal and says, oh crap, I haven't been using my glute, or I haven't been, using my deltoid or whatever. Well, I think what I learned in the...
I didn't hear a swear word, but that was a good...
Well, I was going to call it I was going to call it something else. But
I'm okay with that explanation as a, one sentence summary.
One sentence summary. And it's like layman, right?
Yeah.
I'm still a layman. But there's this... When you look at like, and you talked about swallowing, so if I'm doing like inhale, hum, swallows, if I'm trying to like resynchronize my brain stem, right, and I'm doing breath work, or I'm changing how I breathe, or I'm doing the rapid eye movement, or the, watching the dot on the screen, or I'm sniffing the peppermint, or I'm getting the treatment, or I'm getting the chiropractic adjustment, and I'm bucketing all this together. I believe that it is extremely challenging for the body to not just upload the software that it's receiving, but do that follow-up I mentioned a second ago, where it's like, oh no, that's how I use my glutes. So now when I go hike the mountain, because I went to NeuFit, when I go to the mountain, I don't have the newbie anymore, but like my glute's gonna know what to do. I think that connection, and you tell me if I'm right or wrong, but like my hypothesis is, and that I've carried since, is you won't take it to the mountain if the energy and resource is not available.
Absolutely.
And in my opinion, when you're dealing with a head trauma, and there's so much there, like I said, there's like trauma when you wake up, or trauma when a doctor says something casually that's not supposed to stay with you for a lifetime. Or there's so much physical, emotional, mental trauma, including post-traumatic stress. It is very hard for the energy to be available when you are cognitively or consciously aware of all of that other stuff, or you're packing it away. So for me, I was going through all of the motions. I was doing the work. I was doing the eye movement. But like I didn't really get better, right? Maybe a little bit. But one day, Prococo, he had a whiteboard, right? And he's Italian, and he we connected, and it was like this like Tony Robbins relationship. And he's a big guy. Like getting a chiropractic adjustment from him was always like my favorite thing in the world. It's like him giving you a chiropractic. So I had this respect for this guy, and I think like a strong, like masculine, it's what I needed at the time. But one day he just like shot me point blank, because I'd been going there 3 days a week, and he knew I was seeing John too. And he said something like, it's not just going through the motions. It's not just like showing up and doing it. It's like you got to believe it. You got to internalize it. You have to know you're headed somewhere. You have to actually believe that you can get there. It's not just like staying here, doing everything, but not actually in your heart and your soul believing you'll ever get there, or believing something's wrong with you, or believing you had this thing happen. And so he like slapped me upside the head one day, metaphorically, and like what I would say is it woke me up. And I was like, wow. And it was almost an outsourced, like a surrogate confidence that I could do it. And at that point, like I went through the roof.
Wow.
Because I stopped carrying the baggage. And when you think about like people walking around right now at 92% oxygen, or, you know, whatever it is. There's all these signs and symptoms that, like, energetically you're dissipating your chi, or whatever you want to call it, right? Energetically, stress, worry, self-destructive thoughts, beliefs that you can't get through something. You're right. And it's from a chemical standpoint, you're not producing the serotonin you need. You're not producing. And I think that, like, in my case, like, when this half of my head is in this state of, the body's not going to invest resource into an area that's down-regulated or undercharged if it doesn't think it has enough to even, like, digest your lunch.
Yep.
So until you have the resource available and the body knows it, it's just bursting with electrons or whatever, your brain's not even going to let you. So you might walk out of the office, you might walk out of here like, oh, I feel a little bit better, but tomorrow you're back, because you know what? You went to bed thinking shit, not believing in yourself. And so that was the journey that I went on. There's this, like, that it's almost more important. Mm-hmm. And this is the story of anyone that, like, cures their cancer, or, you know, it's sometimes people get a cancer diagnosis, they're gone in 3 weeks. Sometimes I know a guy that put stage 4 metastatic prostate cancer, Gleason score 9, into full remission. So there's this, like, it's between the ears, even in a head injury, right?
Literally.
And so that was the learning for me, and that's why maybe I'm a coach today, and I, like, help people with some of this stuff. And but I just think, and I'm not taking away any of the therapies, that you won't make the progress without them. Mm-hmm. But I think so many people, that's where they're hung up, right? Especially when you wake up and your arm is in a flex position for no reason, or especially when your doc shows that you walk in a straight line. But when you have a doc or a practitioner or a coach, or who's just he's just witnessing. So, like, Dr. John's style, he's just a witness. And so, like, when I would do something, he'd be like, hey, like, calling one of his friends, like, hey, check this out. Check this head injury out. Like, this is bizarre. I've never even seen this. We're going to fix it, but I've never seen that. And so there was this casual, optimistic curiosity that, in combination with Percoco Tony Robbins, was just this, like, magic combination. And that's why I kept going to both of them, because I was like, when I would tell my then girlfriend, like, what I'm doing here and why I'm spending all our money on these people, I was like, well, he kind of gets me feeling good for the week, but I know Marchese's given me what I need to get through this, right? So I would walk out of Marchese's place charged up, or Percoco's place, and I would walk out of Marchese's, like, confident I had the right team.
That's interesting that you need both.
Yeah.
And we went in a little different direction here than, like, the first time you and I talked about it. And that's awesome, because I think that, you know, these elements that you're touching on here of, yes, having enough energy to support the healing and recovery process, and absolutely the belief, and that comes from, I mean, the opposite, of course, is not believing. If we extrapolate into the future and worry about how it's always going to be this way, right, the amount of stress that causes and energy that wastes or dissipates, like you said, that can hinder the healing process. That creates a whole host of other issues, and I'm so glad that you went in that direction, because I think that, I mean, of course, for the extreme version of your brain injury, that's true. And I think that either patients or practitioners both listening to this can see that, even in, you know, people dealing with sprained ankles or other sports injuries, or especially people, I think, especially in the chronic pain realm, where it's that longer recovery process, something's lingering even after the injury has healed, where there's definitely some sort of element of the brain's response to threat and this mindset and different things that you touched on there. I think that will extrapolate. And then, I mean, certainly with people who are working with brain injury patients and stuff like that, there's obviously a direct correlation, but I love the direction you went with that there.
Yeah. Well, there was, and it's funny too, because, like, to me, and sorry, maybe I took a left instead of a right, and that's the thing. It's like you wind up the clown. But the other thing, that at that same moment, I started working with what I would call like a holistic Czech trained. I went to a Paul Czech event, and it was so funny because when I went to the Paul Czech event, it like was so clashing with everything I knew about nutrition. Mm-hmm. But
was this like you mentioned, you were more classically trained and academic in your academic experience? Was this kind of the inflection point that first exposed you to these alternative approaches or viewpoints?
Exactly. Okay. So when I was doing everything right and still declining in health and performance, I just decided to see what these other guys were up to. Mm-hmm. Like, and I remember my college professor I'm still friends with, when he heard I was going to the Czech thing, he was like, "You're crazy." You're out of here. And I remember leaving and being like, he says you can't have alarm clocks because the light keeps you up at night. And I remember, like, if I said that out loud in 2006, people were like, that guy has literally lost his mind. He's right about the concussion stuff. Yeah, like, it's definitely tapped. But what that workshop taught me is that, like, it's possible there's more to the story. Mm-hmm. And then 2007, around the time that all this was happening, probably that same month or same quarter that Prococo gave me that, like, man-to-man, this is what's going on, this is how you have to change. At the same time, I was put on the epilepsy diet, which is what it was called at the time, mm-hmm. which today we would call the keto diet. Mm-hmm. And believe me, I lost clients out over this because I was still coaching people at that time. You eat butter and coconut oil, you're gonna get heart disease. But again,
yeah, that was so indoctrinated.
It was crazy. Yeah. I had literal clients leave my gym because it was just a personal training studio because they were no longer trusted anything I said. Mm-hmm. But where this kind of starts with that kind of objective experience, when I changed my mind and changed my diet, the diet thing was insane. It was like all of a sudden there was no like detox or keto flu for me. There was nothing like that. Mm-hmm. But the crazy thing I noticed is my whole life I had eczema on the back of my neck and on my elbows. Yeah. And in 2 weeks it was gone. And I'd been using, because I went gluten-free at the time, I went full tilt. It wasn't a great keto diet in retrospect. It wasn't super nutrient dense at the time. It was like mostly olive oil because maybe at that time people weren't quite ready, but like a little coconut oil, little butter. But I basically ate no coffee, no alcohol, and I basically ate chicken, olive oil, a little bit of butter, a little bit of coconut oil, zucchini and summer squash and avocados for 16 months. Mm-hmm. That was like the diet. And so anyways, I went and it was like this like exponential boost. And so I guess where I'm going with this is like, I don't believe you can recover fully or efficiently from almost anything in your life if you don't have all the pieces in play. Mm-hmm. So you at least have to address. So in other words, if someone's going through post-concussion, TBI, PTSD, whatever, you have to eat in accordance with that belief system. So if you eat in a way that's consistent with somebody that doesn't take care of themselves or doesn't believe in themselves, that's care. You know what I mean? So like you're running on that diesel. You're running on that. And the brain, you need the chemical. So there's like so much like mental, emotional, spiritual, whatever, but there's also just literal fuel. Mm-hmm. Your body just has this preferential stuff. And so from that, like that healing system, I really think it requires everything at once. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I try to give people now. But.
Well, that's a perfect segue into Runga, and I love how you were able to. I mean, like you said at the beginning here, how your brain injury has been like an indicator or a warning light. Right. That if you're doing things right, you continue to improve, or at least now maintain function, and like interacting with you now. The few times we've been able to be together, I would have no idea without knowing the story that you had a brain injury. I mean, it's a remarkable recovery, but that's so interesting to know that if you deviate, a little bit even, that you'll notice those symptoms, and so you have that onboard indicator, like that warning light on your car's dashboard. Yeah. And then throughout this journey, how you've been able to take that traumatic, I mean, I wouldn't wish that on anybody, that type of brain injury, to take that and turn it into this positive, and how you were able to find this holistic approach and all these pieces that worked for you, and now be able to offer that to people through Runga, through your business. And I know you've done some online stuff. We want to hear about what you're up to. It started originally as these immersive, you come for a day or a few days to a beautiful house in Napa, or you do it on site, corporate wellness retreat or so type of thing. And then can you just walk us through what you're doing there? You mentioned a little bit already of some of the modalities and the nutrition, but what are people experiencing at this event, and what are you using to really move the needle for people and helping them optimize their health?
Right. Great question, Garrett. Thank you. So the truth of the matter is that it was like, it started as an intervention. It was a selfish start, right? So when my former life at Spartan, that company just exploded.
That's right. So you were one of the first few employees with him for 10 years, helped it grow. Right. So I left out that part of the story, but
So
we'll just mention it.
But it's an interesting perspective, because the way that this started was, so in 2007, 2008, 2009. And by the way, 2009, I was when I realized that I cracked the Rubik's Cube. So I was like, holy smokes. Immediately just said, went in this kind of spiritual place where I took off. I moved to the Caribbean. I didn't come back or call anyone for months. And I just had to figure out what I was doing here. Mm-hmm. Because all of a sudden I was Michael J. Fox by 30, but all of a sudden I'm in my early 20s and I'm me, and I can do whatever I want. And so there was this new lease, kind of, because I had internalized that Michael J. Fox comment. It was weird because my family, my mom, always liked Michael J. Fox for some reason. So it was like a cut. It was like a knife, because now I look at him. So it was like a really bizarro experience to be told that, and it definitely pushed me way down. Mm-hmm. And so there was this mix of breaking through in terms of confusion, it was a very strange psychological time. Mm-hmm. But what I realized is I came back in mid to late 2009, and my business exploded. So there was this, when I left, there was this belief that I don't know what I'm doing here. I'm making, good money being a coach and trainer, and all those clients are going to go to other people, and my business is going to be gone. But I just didn't know what else to do. I just needed to do this thing. But when I came back, it was like everyone had been waiting for me. And I opened a business called Ultimate Athlete, and my business just exploded in 2009. 2010, my same college professor that was razzing me about the Paul Chek seminar, he's like, hey, I know you haven't been running, because I quit running in 2007 when I started to go through all this stuff with Marchese and everything else, because I had to basically reduce the burden. Mm-hmm. So I basically quit exercises and started walking. Mm-hmm. And so he calls me, he's like, I know you haven't been running for the last couple of years, but, hey, you gotta, come down, you gotta come up to Vermont and do this thing with me. It's a 5K race through the woods.
Oh yeah, nothing, just 5K.
Yeah, but it was funny, because when I used to be a runner, doing whatever races we were doing, I was the heart rate monitor obsessed type A. I know I'm going to finish this race because I'm going to drink this salt water every 15 minutes. I'm going to drink this carb solution every 45 minutes. I had the perfect amount of amino acids in my breakfast, and my heart rate's going to be between 145 and 150. It's my, so everything is perfect. And I used to say I loved running. I hated it. And so in 2010, I went through this experience that was a 5K race in Vermont, and it was muddy, and we were throwing spears, and I felt alive because I didn't wear a heart rate strap. I didn't do any of that. I wore an old pair of shoes. I didn't mind burning after the event. There was this freedom. And so, as people do, is I caught the bug, right? Well, that was my first trip back. Now, I know this is long-winded, but after so that Spartan Race started, no one thought it was going to be a thing, mm-hmm. right? So I was like, all right, Joe, who started the Spartan Race, who, by the way, we get confused a lot, Joe Distefano, Joe Distefano, it's the same thing. That's how I became Joe D.I., because he's Joe DE. So people just started calling me Joe DI because if they said Joe, like it was just a confusing thing. So when there's only, 10 people in the room and 2 of them are named Joe Distefano and Joe Distefano. So what ended up happening was the business went from a thing that no one really believed in, that we were like donating Tuesday, Thursdays, and weekends to Tuesday, Thursday nights. It was a phone call, right? Like, what should we do? Like, how do we like prep people for this? So it became this thing. So I was running my gym, and then I started. It wasn't until like 2012, 2013 that like I was full time with them,
and
that
the business really was taking off.
People are actually doing this. Mm-hmm. Well, from 2013 to 2017, I traveled to like 25 different countries. Most of those countries I went to 3, 4, 5 times. I went to Spain 3 times in 1 year.
So your Spartan races are like every weekend, basically,
everywhere
in the world, yeah.
Every weekend. So managing a team of 30 or so professional athletes, teaching weekend workshops to personal trainers so they know how to train people at the event. But basically what would happen was we'd have our world championship in October. By November, I was completely just mentally demolished and getting symptomatic again and not feeling good in any area of life, and knowing that I needed to go see Marchese. And that's why I still, till I moved to California, was still seeing Marchese like as often as I could. But I started taking December off because I was like, I just can't, I'm not a 12-month-a-year guy. like if I do that, I'll be in a wheelchair the following January. Mm-hmm. So I started just going away in December, going down to Central America, wherever, and just doing like a week or 2 of just an outrageous amount of yoga, an outrageous amount of meditation, an outrageous amount of healthy eating, just everything that I make in big ass fires and dancing around them at night, whatever I had to do, I was doing it at this experience. And I would come back, and that same experience where I went to the Caribbean, came back, and my business exploded, I would do that every year, where I'd be like, here's what's going to happen. I'm not going to show up for the next month, but in January, I'm going to be like Superman. Like, I'm going to be just so charged up. And so it became an annual thing. And then I started hosting an event once a year. I started getting expensive, so I was like, I got to offset my costs and invite people so that I can go for free. Started letting people sign up for it. Once a year event. We started selling it out in no time. People would literally like hack my websites when it was sold out. Like I had people that would somehow break my website. Like it was sold out. So one
was it
year,
Runga at the time, or they didn't have the?
It was just Joe's Fun Week.
And joesfunweek.com, and people found it.
joesfunweek.com. Once a year. Well, it was funny because now my wife is like, she looks at me, because let's be serious, 2018 she basically took over. Now I'm like a decoration. Mm-hmm. But in the beginning it was funny because she's like, you realize how ridiculous you are. You have the year in your domain name. So it would be like, whatever it was, it became Runga, but we'll say it was like runga2018.com. Like she's like, you realize like that is the most amateur thing. You have to buy a new domain every year.
So someone's gonna try and buy next year and sell it to you for like really expensive.
So it just goes to show it started just so organically. And when I would cap it at 30 people, and then someone like the website broke, and somehow in one weekend 60 people signed up for my 30-person event.
If you're ready to supercharge your practice, listen to this. Garrett and Team NeuFit have just released a new online course entitled Introduction to the NeuFit Method. In this detailed 8-hour course, you'll gain mastery of the fundamental techniques in our practice, including muscle testing and activations, nerve glides, and joint articulations. You'll also get introduced to our patented direct current stimulation device, the newbie, an incredible machine that's empowered professionals just like you to help their patients heal, adapt, and grow faster than they ever thought possible. To learn more, go to www.neu.fit/learn. And now back to the show.
So the year that I realized we sold 60 spots in 72 hours to a 30-person event, I had to call up Costa Rica. I'm like, how many like tents can you set up? Like, what are you gonna do? That was the year I was like, okay, this is something. Like, there's something going on here. So the next year it became Runga. Invited Ben, and I think Ben Greenfield had already been coming, but he was, at the time, he was a podcaster, but he wasn't who he is today. He's now just like unbelievable. But at the time he was like a popular podcaster, but he was a great guy, and he was just a friend. And so Ben started coming down, started promoting it. It just became this thing. And so I called it Runga, and the story there is, again, it's the same story. There's a yoga pose called chaturanga, and in the yoga that I'd been doing the previous years, it was this really hot, ridiculously like Bikram, even hotter maybe, and it was this really intense yoga. But what happened was like 45 minutes of just pure insanity, and then you chaturanga. And so when you think about taking December off, it was like the 45 minutes of yoga, December off, exhale. So then I was like, I'll call this thing chaturanga. That'll be cool. And then like it's just like, okay, like Runga. And then that first event that we called it Runga, people were like, my Runga tribe, it's a Runga thing.
It just kind of clicked.
It clicked. Yeah. So it was like, okay, that's what
cool.
It's called. Now here's the thing. It's evolved a lot. But the idea here is what happens if we give people everything that they need, literally, in 1 day, 4 days, 6 days, 8 days, whatever the event is. What happens if someone goes from 0 to 100? And the answer is, if you go from 0 to 100, you buy 3 to 6 months of feeling good.
Wow.
And then hopefully you come back. Or you learn, the most important thing, like I said, is like the fishing pole analogy. The most important thing is you learn that ice baths are your thing.
So that, let me back. So you're saying, I mean, like, the actual, if you have a, fairly crappy lifestyle and you have 3 solid days, that you're saying that's going to carry over, or it's going to, even if you go back to that lifestyle, or it's going to carry over because you're going to build new habits and you're going to start to, like...
Yeah, great question.
I just want to pressure check this one a little bit.
So here's the thing. Let me can this be an extra long show, or can we
yes.
Put this into 3 different things, 3 different shows?
I'll
put the whole thing on my podcast. And so here's the thing. I quit nutrition consults as a coach like in 2005, right? Like just a couple of years after I started coaching people. Because I was like, you want me to give you a piece of paper that says cup of oatmeal and a protein shake, salad with chicken on it, sweet potato and steak? Like, I can give you a piece of paper, or I can say, what's the healthiest thing you've eaten in the last 30 days for breakfast? What's the healthiest thing you've eaten in the last 30 days for lunch? What's the healthiest thing you've eaten in the last 30 days? Can you do that till we talk again? End of nutrition consult, and all of a sudden you're empowered. So with the Runga experience, here's the thing. When I say you're gonna walk in the door, all of a sudden you're gonna feel safety, you're gonna feel like you belong, you're gonna feel like you're a part of a tribe, plus you're gonna get 4 hours of hyperbaric oxygen, 4 hours of PEM, 2 hours of massage, you're gonna learn how to swing a kettlebell, you're gonna eat the most nutritious, most organic, best food in the world, and you're gonna be surrounded by people who think, act, and believe things that you believe. Why do you get 3 to 6 months? Because our guests internalize these practices as their own. And when they go home, they couldn't eat the way they used to eat if they tried. Because they remember how they felt when every dial on the flux capacitor was flicked, right? And so I don't need to say, here's your new diet plan, make sure you follow it for the next 3 to 6 months. They just do it. And so that was the learning back in 2016 when we first called it Runga. They just own it. They know that a kettlebell is all they need. They know that nutrition matters. They know that they can tolerate ice baths. Ice baths are kind of like our fire walk. So there's the way that we do it, it's kind of interesting, we could talk about it. We do it very different than most other cold immersion practices, Wim Hof or whoever. But when people get spit out, most of them get addicted to it, right? They start doing it at least once a week, and that goes a long way. They start taking the daily cold shower. So I'd say that that's what I mean by that.
It's like once you've had that contrast, like you know how good you can feel, and you get a glimpse of it, you don't want to go back.
Right.
Like
and
that.
you can't.
Yeah. You can't unknow it.
It takes 3 to 6 months for you to truly regress, as in most cases. If they were eating pure garbage and not exercising, it takes 3 to 6 months if they don't have roadblocks. And that's why we created the online community. So that when people come through, they come through the live event. Now we'll keep some guardrails or keep the train on the tracks. Maybe we can get a year out of it, right? And then you can come back and do another public event or something. Do a private event with your business, or bring your friends, your family. We'll do something. But that's the idea, is that there's such a large impulse that most people tend to stick with it, but life gets in the way. People have kids. A lot of times there's regress. 3 months later, 2 months later, they're doing but it's not as bad as it was pre-event. And so I guess that's what I mean. But a lot of times too, people realize the therapies and things that work for them. Mm-hmm. And so when they leave, they go find Garrett. When they leave, they go buy the kettlebells, or they go.
It kind of flips that switch.
It flips the switch.
And it's for some people it's the cold water. For some people it's the nutrition that really resonates as the base. So for some people it's the kettlebell. For some people maybe it's the hyperbaric chamber. For some people it's the newbie.
Right.
Whatever.
Absolutely. I want to do the newbie.
I mean, whatever it is. For some people are probably inspired and try to do the whole thing.
People, that's the big thing, and that's the challenge of getting it into 4 days or whatever. But here's the thing, it's the beauty of the event. So like we talked about, so when we incorporate newbie in the next one, which we should of course do, if you had a client or patient walk in and for the last 3 days their diet has been perfect, they've been moving, they've been getting sun, they've been grounding, they've been doing yoga, meditation, sound baths, and all these other things we throw at them, don't you think the results are going to be a little bit better in the newbie? Like
you said, you got to have the resources, the raw materials, the energy, and they're going to have it. So they're going to be able to push themselves harder in the session. They're going to have more bandwidth to recover. I mean, unequivocally, yes.
Yeah, it was, and that's the magic. And so the cheat, I guess, is that we're cheating in that we're giving them a supercharged version of the newbie, because they might do more newbie in the weekend. Plus, they have every other piece of the puzzle in play, but it shows them that you have to have a foot in every area.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I like it. It's a multifaceted approach.
It's like the Trivial Pursuit.
Which it needs to be.
Yeah. Trivial Pursuit pie square pieces.
Yeah. It all matters, and all those inputs, the electrical, light, movement, nutrition, sleep, oxygen, and CO2. I mean, they all matter. We respond differently and meaningfully to all those inputs. I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah.
If people want to look up Runga, they want to find you.
Yeah.
I hesitate to even have you.
Yeah. RungaLife.com. Runga Life on Instagram. It's not the name of the business. I was razzing you earlier. So the business is just called Runga, and it's not even a business. Call it a community. Call it a fun weekend with Joe, whatever. But Runga Life is the Instagram handle and the website.
And then what's your personal Instagram? I know you have great content on there. I enjoy
sometimes
checking in from time to time.
Yeah, Coach Joe DI. Coach Joe DI is the Instagram. It's also the .com. It's also the Facebook. It's the YouTube. Podcast is called Stacked. Mm-hmm. Stacked with Joe Distefano, which is health, wellness.
Yes. Fabulous content on there. I'll give a plug for that.
Oh, thank you so much. It's as you know, these are labor of love, and they're tons of fun, but you get to hang and meet people and chat and share. And
Absolutely.
It's fun.
I think that for this, I'm really excited for the people in our community to listen to this, because I think that insight into your recovery journey and I mean, what worked, in terms of methodology, but even more importantly, how it only really worked when you filled in the gaps and when it clicked for you, and that mindset and the nutrition, how that kind of holistic approach, how you needed that. I think that's really insightful, and I think that we have NeuFit providers out there who will probably share this episode with their patients who are recovering from brain injuries or strokes or a different thing. Like I think this.
Well, we know John's going to share it.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I mean, I think this will inspire a lot of people, and I'm so glad that you got to work with John. He connected us, and then Ben and Adam also connected. I mean, it's great.
Well, it's a small world. Yeah. It's a real small world, and I'm grateful to be here and to know you, and to at some point I'll be we'll be incorporating the newbie totally, definitely. It's like the only piece of the puzzle not there right now. So
I love it.
It fits right in.
Yeah, we're big believers in what you're doing, and I appreciate you coming on and sharing both your personal experience and then some insights into that Runga experience. I can't wait to go to one myself.
Man. October.
That's right.
Right here in Austin.
So to all you listeners, hopefully we'll see you there. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Undercurrent Podcast. Coach Joe D.I. It's been a pleasure.
Hey, man. Thanks, Garrett.
Thank you.
Awesome to be here.
Heck yeah.
Thank you so much for listening to the Undercurrent Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a review and be sure to subscribe to stay up to date as we release future episodes.